and is the KMG show. Well, there have been lots of surprises in 2020, but did anyone suspect, even a month ago, for the re-election of Donald Trump? I didn't see it happen, but here we are. And this has been no less the New York Times. A story today, how chaos in Kenosha is swaying voters constant as residents see fires looting. Some worry that local Democratic leaders are failing to keep control of the situation. And this story is by Sabrina Tavernise and Ellen Alderson, and it begins. John Garrity mentions every day he focuses on getting his son to sport practice, working at his job. Woke up on Monday morning, lives of his hometown, Kenosha, Minneapolis, at his doorstep. A white officer on in the back multiple times. The Democratic state leaders seem unable to contain the spiraling crisis. It's crazy to do about it. It doesn't seem powers that be want to do much. Calculated warnings of Trump and the Republican Party about chaos envelop America. Should Democrats win Kenosha, the southeast corner of one of the most critical states in this election, where protests have raged for a number of increasingly combustible nights. While many demonstrators have been peaceful, others have set fire to buildings. At least 4 businesses downtown have been looted. Men armed with guns have shown up to confront protesters, leading to the shooting of 3 people, 2 of them fatally. On Wednesday, a white teenager from across the state line in Illinois was arrested in connection to the shooting of troops. In Kenosha County, where the president won by fewer than 250 votes in 2016, those who already supported Trump said in interviews that the events of the past days have simply reinforced the conviction that he is the man for the job. Stop it, we're currently nudging them toward the Republicans. Some Democrats, nervous about condemning the looting because they said they understood the rage behind it, worried that what was happening in their town might backfire and aid the president's re-election prospects. Yet the situation in Kenosha remains extremely fluid. Many people in the city are enraged about the police shooting of Black man Jacob Blake. The Democratic nominee for president, Joe Biden, spoke with his family and said that justice must and will be done. On Wednesday night, in response to the shooting, athletes from the NBA, WNBA, Major League Baseball, and Major League Soccer refused to participate in games, and more on that later. And following the arrest of the teenager in connection with the 2 fatal shootings, it emerged he had displayed support for Trump on social media. Oh dear, oh dear. Ellen Ferwenda, who owns an antique furniture store downtown just blocks from the worst of the destruction that is now closed, said that she was desperate for Trump to lose in November, but that she had huge concern the unrest in her town could help him win. She added that local Democratic leaders seemed hesitant to condemn the mayhem. I think they just don't know what to say, she said. People are afraid to take a stance either way, but I do think it's strange they're all being so quiet. Our mayor has disappeared. It's like, where is he? On Tuesday evening, Ferwenda was writing Black Lives Matter on her storefront in red paint. And I'll just interject to say that if she thinks that's going to spare her building, she must be a stupid woman. On Wednesday, after the fatal shooting the night before, she said she was most worried about the people from out of town who were driving around with powerful guns claiming to keep the peace. And are the people directing the rioting in Kenosha, are they locals? Are they Kenosha residents? Or are they Soros plants? She said she understood the looting and burning. I think the rage is justified. Anyone who was paying attention should know it was going to explode at some point. Garrity, a former Marine, said he was disturbed to see his town looking like a war zone, and he feared that the Democrats in charge were letting people down big time. Politics for him had long been like a sport he did not follow. In his late 20s, he voted for Barack Obama, the first vote of his life. He did not vote in 2016, and he called the president's handling of the coronavirus laughable. Garrity said he disliked how Trump talked, but said that the Democratic Party's vision for governing seemed limited to attacking him and calling him a racist. a charge being leveled so constantly that it was having the effect of alienating rather than persuading people. And the idea that Democrats alone were morally pure on race annoyed him. The Democratic agenda to me right now is America is systematically racist and evil, and the only people who can fix it are Democrats. That's the vibe I get. Garrity said he understood peaceful protesting, but felt frustrated with Democratic leaders who seem afraid of confronting crowds when things turn violent. He was angry at the statement by Governor Tony Evers on Sunday, which in his view took sides against the police in a knee-jerk way that worsened the situation. On Tuesday, Evers, a Democrat, did condemn the looting and fires while reiterating protesters' rights to assemble. I'm not 100% sure of anything yet, Garrity said, but as of now, I'm really not happy about Democrats are handling any of this. Biden on Wednesday denounced systemic racism and police brutality as he also sharply condemned the destruction of violence unfolding in Kenosha. This must be a different statement than the, nothing tweet that he sent out, which said pretty much, I'm against all of those things that everyone hates. As I said, after George Floyd's murder, protesting brutality is a right and absolutely necessary, Biden said. Burning down communities is not protest, it's needless violence, violence that endangers lives, violence that guts businesses and shutters businesses that serve the community. That's wrong. Yes, I recall it was, 2 or 3 weeks ago that Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, in response to the continuous violence, said something to the effect of people are going to do what they're going to do. Meanwhile, Trump promised on Twitter to restore law and order in Kenosha by sending in troops. We will not stand for looting, arson, violence, and lawlessness on American streets. While the unrest in Kenosha happening the same week as the Republican National Convention, local events were threatening to merge with national politics. James Widgerson, editor of a conservative website in Waukesha, Wisconsin, said the chaos reinforced the message of the Republicans this week that the Democrats were not fit to govern. Whether it's fair or not, they all see this as one monolith, from Biden on down to the guy throwing the brick at the cop, Widgerson said. As a result, they are more motivated not to let those people win. That was all the more true for committed Republicans in Kenosha. Don Bean, 62, owner of a flooring company, was standing in line at a gun store Tuesday afternoon. He said that he had never bought a pistol before, but that he had a business to protect. A former county board supervisor, Bean said he had been calling county and state officials for days, trying to explain how grave the situation was. Neither John Antaramarian, the mayor of Kenosha, nor Jim Kreuzer, the county executive, responded to requests for comment. The positions are nonpartisan, but both men previously served in the state assembly as Democrats. There's people running all over with guns. It's like some Wild West town, Bean said. We are just waiting here like sitting ducks, waiting to get picked off. It's chaos. Everybody is afraid. Trump was not my man, but now he is grateful he is president. Nobody fighting back. Nobody is paying attention to what's going on. Scott Haight, who was boarding up a line of businesses in a Kenosha strip mall on Tuesday, said he blamed Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes. Yes, the Lieutenant Governor of the state of Wisconsin is named Mandela Barnes, a Democrat, for what he said was irresponsibly stirring up emotion. On Monday, Barnes said the shooting wasn't an accident. It's like, what are you trying to do, burn our city down? Haight said. Haight, 59, a lifelong Democrat, has decided not to vote this year. It's not worth it. One's as bad as the other. Priscilla Gazda, a waitress at a pizza restaurant in Kenosha, was having the opposite reaction. She said she had voted only once in her life for Obama in 2008. Her son has type 1 diabetes and was hoping for health insurance. I'm not the one who would ever vote, she said, but after the chaos in her town, this year is different. I'm going to vote for Trump, she said. He seems to be more about the American people and what they need. Keep in mind, that story was from the New York Times, which tells me that the elite is beginning to panic about this. I guess it's like coronavirus. that it's all very well, they thought. Let's cheer on the virus because it's going to mean that Trump loses. But now it appears that the riots, which were somehow proof that America was systemically racist, which was going to redound to the benefit of the Democrats and Biden, has now turned against them in a very big way. So, how is CNN covering this, I wonder? Well, you can all guess, right? CNN being the first name in fake news. This is a story from John Nolte and Breitbart. With Kenosha literally on fire behind one of their left-wing activists, CNN put up a chyron that read, "Fiery but mostly peaceful protests after police shooting." This is not a joke. This is not a drill. Calvin Robinson had tweeted, "I thought this was disinformation when I saw the screenshots." It's not. A CNN reporter is genuinely stood in front of a burning neighborhood, telling viewers that violent riots were in fact mostly peaceful protests. After the shootings, of course, MSN is a parody of itself, and there is a embedded video here with a reporter for CNN holding a microphone, and there is the sky. The sky is lit by the orange fire consuming everything behind him, but it's mostly peaceful. So CNN has a fake correspondent standing in front of what he himself describes as one of multiple locations that have been burning in Kenosha, Wisconsin over the course of the night, and the chyron reads, "Fiery but mostly peaceful protests after police shooting." You think CNN is trolling us, right? You think that's all CNN is now, a troll channel. You think that's what the chyron is, a deliberate troll against the honesty and decency of everyday Americans. You think CNN gets its lulls that way. Oh no, CNN isn't trolling anyone. What CNN is doing is revealing its true mindset. That CNN chyron flashed on Wednesday. I saw it fly by on Twitter a gajillion times yesterday, but assumed it was a joke, a deep fake. You might think the only deep faker here is CNN, but that's unfair. CNN isn't lying or trolling. When you keep in mind that CNN has spent most of the last decade devoting itself to endorsing, encouraging, normalizing, and fomenting political violence against its political enemies on the right, what we have at CNN is a mob so morally broken that in their diseased minds, they honestly do see what's happening in Kenosha as mostly peaceful. Stay with me here. What I mean is, CNN is sincere in its belief that the level of violence in these Democrat-run cities, especially Kenosha, for reasons I'll explain below, is too peaceful, and CNN finds that unsatisfactory and unacceptable. You see, CNN doesn't want Kosovo and Kenosha. CNN wants Hiroshima, especially in a traitorous place like Kenosha, a place that betrayed the cause and voted for Trump in 2016, helped squeak the orange bad man over the finish line in Wisconsin, which squeaked him right into the Oval Office. See what I'm getting at here? When you want to see the MAGA-tards burn, all the MAGA-tards, what you want to see them fed into a Holocaust, Kenosha is mostly peaceful. And man, how frustrating is that? You do know that police are not the real targets in all this, right? You have figured out by now that the police are only under fire because they are what stands in the way of the left's true targets, which is you and I, which is average middle-class Americans who just want to raise families, mow lawns, and live and let live. Along with the Democrat Party and the terrorist groups who call themselves Black Lives Matter and Antifa, CNN wants us dead, wants our neighborhoods razed, our lives destroyed. We're in the way of the terrorist revolution, and the terrorist revolutionaries are done with this pussyfooting around. Violence, that's not violence. What you're seeing in Kenosha isn't peaceful. Wait until you see what violence really looks like. So yeah, in CNN's malignant mind, Kenosha is mostly peaceful. Too goddamn peaceful, way too goddamn peaceful for those goddamn MAGA-tards. Burn it all. Burn all of them. And apparently the protests are spilling out into the suburbs. Again from Breitbart, this time from Hannah Blow. Demonstrators in Kenosha took to residential areas Wednesday, the fourth night of the protests, honking vehicle horns and yelling to wake up the neighborhood. One video taken by the Daily Caller's Shelby Talcott shows demonstrators lining the street and honking their horns in what she believes to be one of the wealthier areas of Kenosha. Talcott tweeted, "We just stopped in the street where Anthony Huber was shot and died. This woman in tears speaks about him. We've marched to, I believe, one of the wealthier areas of Kenosha. The crowd is honking and yelling to wake up the neighborhood." Town Hall's Julio Rosas captured a similar scene, demonstrators taking the protest to residential areas. BLM March now going through those residential areas, and they're trying to wake people up by chanting, using megaphones, and banging buckets. A man encourages the BLM crowd to march through the part of town where the white people and cops live in Kenosha, quote, "take it to their shit," unquote. I'm afraid that Black English has diverged so much from received English that I think I understand what that means, but I suspect very soon it's going to be like that scene from Airplane where you have the mom from Leave It to Beaver explaining, "I speak jive." Yes, I think we're almost there. Brendan Gutenschwager, protesters disrupt the peace in Kenosha tonight, shining lasers and lights into houses along their march route shortly before midnight. Is this what they call winning friends and influencing people? It's not really the Dale Carnegie approach, is it? Protests began in Kenosha Sunday following the police-involved shooting of Jacob Blake. According to the Wisconsin Department of Justice, Blake had a knife in his possession, and agents recovered the knife from the driver's board of Blake's vehicle. The Wisconsin Department of Justice said the Kenosha police officer who shot Jacob Blake is called Rustin Shesky. Is he under police protection? I was talking yesterday about how Sean King, aka Talcum X, was going to list all of the members of the Kenosha Police Department, presumably with that they're all guilty by. So if someone took it in his head to deliver justice to any of these cops, this would be pleasing to Sean King. I'll just remind listeners that Darren Wilson, who was fully vindicated by the exhaustive investigation into his killing of Michael Brown, the gentle giant, he was nonetheless fired by the Ferguson, Missouri Police Department and fled the town, and now I believe lives in some undisclosed location, certainly not capable of getting police work anymore. And what's the message of this? The message of this is, well, what we have learned from Ferguson, what we have learned from Baltimore, that when police get calls in Black neighborhoods, they're simply going to sit on their hands. This is the world that they made. Let them live in it. Let's see. Yes, the state. Oh, yes. There's now a federal civil rights investigation into the shooting of Jacob Blake. We don't have a state invest yet. No, but the Department of Justice has to stick its oar in just to let everyone know that if this police officer is not charged or jury finds him not guilty, then Washington will make sure, just as in the case of the officers in the Rodney King case, that they will be tried again. No, it's not double jeopardy, which is, unconstitutional. How is it not double jeopardy? Well, we're not charging him with the same crime. How are you not charging him with the same crime? Oh, we're going to charge him with violating this man's civil rights. Well, how did he violate his rights? By shooting him to death. Oh, so it's definitely the same charge. You may have seen that in one of these looting incidents, what was it, Madison, Wisconsin, perhaps, that an enraged employee, after the plate glass window had been smashed and the looters were heading into the store, this employee yelled out, "Are you trying to re-elect Trump?" that seems to be the way it's turned out. Let's see, this is police video of black murder suspect shooting himself dead in Minneapolis after fake rumor spreads that cops killed him sparked violence. The suspect allegedly shot another man around 2 p.m. earlier Wednesday. Officers found him in front of Nicollet Mall in downtown Minneapolis around 6 p.m. But as they moved to arrest him, he took out a gun and killed himself. Rumors emerged that he was killed by officers, sparking unrest and looting. Mayor Jacob Frey ordered a curfew, and Governor Tim Walz declared a peacetime emergency in Minneapolis and said he was mobilizing the Minnesota National Guard. You know, the argument will be made, probably has already been made, that the police actually killed this man. That he killed himself because the police killed him, or they would have crippled him, or they would have ruined his life in some way. And then in any event, living as a black man in America is not worth living. So it was, the leftists used to say, a revolutionary suicide. Fire, said a Minneapolis spokesman, video from the social media Thursday, and tweeted, yesterday MPD posted a video in order to dispel rumors of significant public safety concerns for our cities after receiving feedback from the community. We have removed the video due to the graphic nature and out of respect to the individual, his family, and the community. Gets the impression that Minneapolis deserves to be burned to the ground. They don't seem to be in any, we have a bunch of videos. So what was looted? Where are they looting hotspots? What can I find here? Target, okay. Saks Fifth Avenue, you know, they just want clothes. They want clothes for the women folk and for their kiddies. Foot Locker, kids need shoes. Brits Pub in downtown Minneapolis was set on fire. Okay. They don't need booze. I suppose they can loot that from another location. Okay, moving on. The Z-Man has some thoughts on what's going on in Kenosha. He says that it has now become the pivot point for the revolution from above being waged on Middle America. Riots have convulsed the city for 3 nights since a violent black rapist was shot by police after resisting arrest. Large swaths of the city have been burned as the mayor cheered on the rioters. This led to the shooting of 3 rioters by a 17-year-old kid who volunteered to help defend the property owners. The video of the incident has become a worldwide sensation. Of course, this being Jim Snow America, the white kid is now charged with capital murder and faces life in prison. White people who kill in self-defense get charged with capital murder, while blacks who kill for sport are allowed to go free. See, the former is exercising white privilege and is guilty of being white. The latter, on the other hand, is the victim of white privilege and is justifiably angry. In post-reality America, privilege means being stripped of your rights and dignity. If Kyle Rittenhouse was a black or an immigrant from the third world, or even a transsexual, he would not be in jail right now. He would be held up as a hero by the mainstream media. President Trump would send Air Force One to bring him to Washington for a special ceremony. Speakers at the Republican convention would be told to mention his name in their speeches. He is white, so no one at the convention will mention his name. Unlike other cases where the media can suppress the truth while spreading lies, this time the truth was all over the internet before the media could act. As soon as it happened, social media had video of the attack on Rittenhouse. He fell to the ground as violent criminals attacked him, and he opened fire on them. There can be no narrative in which he is the villain. He may have been naive, but he was simply following the civic nationalist code and doing what he thought was his duty. This is Jim Snow America. A white kid following the rules is guilty no matter what the facts say, so he sits in prison. His family started a defense fund on GoFundMe, but it was immediately taken down. Again, in Jim Snow America, whites are not allowed to avail themselves of the resources for self-defense. The system will now wage war on this kid's family in order to prevent them from defending their son. In Jim Snow America, white people just have to take it. It is an infuriating reality for sure. In a better world, the mayor of Kenosha would already be swinging from a tree. The good people of that city would have remembered the words of Jefferson and fertilized their tree of liberty. Of course, in a sane society, it would never have come to this. There would be no riots sponsored by the ruling class, so Kyle House would not have felt the need to go out in the streets. The reason all of this happened is the rulers made it happen. As infuriating as it may be, it is this reality that must shine through. Those old rules you were taught about the law and your rights as an American no longer exist. They certainly don't exist if you are white. If you are white, the system sees you as an enemy and will spare no expense in attacking you. The reason Kyle Rittenhouse sits in jail is no one told him this. Instead, internet warriors playing tough guy online encouraged him to be a man of action. That is why people who like saying, well, at least he is doing something, need to be shouted down at every opportunity. These are people who think every cause needs martyrs just as long as they are not the martyr. So they encourage everyone else to be foolishly brave. Like James Fields, we have another naive and impressionable young man, white man, facing life in a cage because he was convinced that doing something is always better than doing nothing. This is just one aspect of a larger point that white people need to grasp. None of this would be happening if not for the political class. The Kenosha Police Department has tanks and armored vehicles. They have highly trained tactical units that are trained by Israeli Special Forces officers. The Kenosha Police Force could invade a small country, but they are nowhere to be found during these riots. The reason they are absent is the police have ordered them to let the riots rage. This is what makes Kenosha a pivot point in the ruling class revolt. This kid is not a scary monster who can be anathematized by the system. Even vulgarians like David Frum thinks he looks innocent. Yes, this is now the significance of the Kenosha riots. White people are faced with the reality of their sons being sent to prison for the crime of being white. They face having their businesses destroyed because non-whites are ungrateful. They're being harassed at restaurants and in their home by mobs, sponsored by the ruling class. It's no longer an abstract political argument. It's daily reality. Let's have a look at the chat. Chocokin666 says the media's job seems to be invert reality, turning angels into devils and devils into saints. Yes, it's the moral inversion that the Hungarian philosopher Michael Polanyi wrote about. Tricky Woo says they got exactly what they voted for. Well, yes, and I suspect this is coming true, or it's becoming evident to a lot of these people. I mean, the people of San Francisco who voted in London Breed, yes, that is the name of the woman who was the mayor of San Francisco, London Breed. Oh, here's a nice black lady who's going to make sure that everything is just in San Francisco. I make a lot of money in Silicon Valley, but I want justice. And then they walk out into the streets, or they're afraid to leave their apartments because there are people defecating, urinating, shooting up, screaming gibberish and threatening to attack them. And as I say, I suspect that some of these people are perhaps coming to the conclusion that electing people like London Breed, or for that matter, the terrifying Lori Lighthouse in Chicago, was perhaps not such a good idea. But it's also possible, perhaps more likely, that the voters in San Francisco, Chicago, and other places are what the Catholic Church used to call invincibly ignorant. Again, from Chocokin666, they beat a 70-year-old man for trying to extinguish his burning business, broke his jaw. MCT says, I'm old enough to remember when arson was a crime. Well, look at it this way. Look at it this way. Thomas Fleming wrote, about 20 years ago, that we have returned to the status justice of the Middle Ages, that people are not judged on absolutes any longer. They are judged according to their class, and they are judged by a jury of their peers, truly of their peers. That is to say, if black people and their white allies, that rioting, burning, looting, etc., is justified, well, then it is justified because these are their peers. Uh, Deus ex suburbia says, I still believe the Republicans are still being way too weak in the face of this mass violence. Way too weak. I've often thought that myself, but keep in mind, Donald Trump and the Republican Party are not, they're not facing electorate made up of people like us. They're facing the whole of the United States. And there's a great deal of ambiguity there. There's also a great deal of ignorance, some of it forced ignorance. That you see this dog and pony show at the Republican National Convention, bringing in all these minorities, bringing in all these immigrants. And the point of this is to demonstrate that the Republicans and Donald Trump are really nice people, and that they are thoroughly amenable to liberal values, even as the inferno rages outside. Of course, what Trump's enemies don't understand is that Trump really is a liberal and a civic nationalist. They also don't understand that if Trump fails, or if Trump is pushed out, what is going to succeed him on the right is going to be far nastier than Donald Trump. Tom Anderson, KMG, did you see Don Lemon said on his show that the violence needs to end because it's starting to show up negatively in the polls and focus groups? Indeed, I did. I talked about that yesterday. Chogokin 666 used to be shoot on sight for looters and arsonists. Well, yes. I suppose one of the headlines for this year could be, what if they gave a race war and only one side fought? Because it was very different in 1968, which I remember well. Followed it very closely on television and the newspapers and in the magazines. And I recall Mayor Daley giving an order to the Chicago police with regard to people who not desist from rioting to shoot to kill. And as far as Kenosha goes, I suspect a few volleys of rubber bullets would send the rioters fleeing for their lives. But they're not even willing to use that. Yeah, someone's going to point out that rubber bullets can and have killed people, which is true. Suppose if you're unlucky enough to take one of those rounds in the eye or in the temple, you could be killed. But no, I mean, the alternative is to watch your city burn down. And the cops get paid one way or the other. They don't really care. I suspect some of them are enraged by this, but they know that if they do not follow orders, they'll be sacked, and perhaps worse than that, they'll come to the attention of the Department of Justice, state or federal. William Hicks says Kyle Rittenhouse put the men of Kenosha to shame, didn't he? They stayed home to reread their insurance policies, while the 17-year-old from out of town took on the arson banditos. It's true. He did put them to shame. But as I was discussing yesterday, with that tweet storm that I read out, Kenosha is a small city. It's only 100,000, but there doesn't seem to be any community there. There doesn't seem to be any community in any of these towns. When Nolte says, live and let live, he doesn't understand this, but he is describing the death of community. And, the neighbor's lawn. He hasn't mowed that lawn for weeks and weeks, and it's now, 4 inches high. It's an eyesore. I'm not going to step next door and talk to my neighbor because that could be unpleasant. I'll simply call the city authority or the municipal authority, get some official to take care of it. I wouldn't want to try to explain to my next door neighbor that he is my neighbor and that he lives on a street in a community and he has an obligation not to let his property go to rack and ruin, because I don't want to be a busybody. I don't want to be one of those NIMBYs I hear so much about. Tom Anderson, mostly peaceful rapists and pedophiles shot by Kenosha. Kyle, yeah, I'll get to that shortly. Republicans need stronger rhetoric, says Deus ex suburbia. Was it Napoleon said, never interrupt your enemy while he is making a mistake? Look, that sounds cynical, and it is cynical. But if Trump had sent in the National Guard from the very beginning, he may not even be president right now. Perhaps the military would have taken out. And I'm not joking about this. Other people have suggested this as well. Oh, yes, the rage and the grief over George Floyd, this must be expressed. That's the principle. We saw it in Ferguson. We saw it in Baltimore. The rage has to be spent. And then after it's spent, then, I don't know, we can try and rebuild these burned down neighborhoods. I mean, if it's even worth it, you know. Let's see. Hope they don't burn Big Al's Diner, Sachoga 666. Tricky Woo says, yeah, we need a few more Kyles. The protesters will think twice before burning down people's houses and businesses. Well, yes. Kent State, May 1970, 4 college students were shot to death by soldiers of the Ohio National Guard. I don't know what they were throwing stones and such like. And this shocked the nation. Within a week or so, another 2 students, this time black, were killed at Jackson State University. And a lot of the pundits were saying that the revolution begins in September, when school begins again. And as Tom Wolfe reported, it was exceedingly peaceful on America's college campuses in September 1970, because the students had realized that playing at revolution can get you killed. And yes, as the old saying goes, it's it's all fun and games rioting until someone gets shot to death or he has his arm blown off. So some of these Antifa types might rethink their tactics. It's only a crime for normal people, says Walrus Libertarian. Yes, this is true. William Hicks, great point, Kevin. The protests aren't really about persuasion. They're like SJW priests. The power of my laser pen compels you. Well, the successful strategy for dealing with riots, or let's say unrest or a pre-riot situation, is well known. The police do it. They all know it, which is you move in fast and hard before things get out of hand. Because once things get out of hand, well, then are you going to get into a situation where you're going to have to start killing people to get things to stop? We saw this in Vancouver after the Vancouver's second great hockey riot, after they had lost to the Boston Bruins in the final of the Stanley Cup. I'm trying to remember what year it was. But so there was an angry, drunken crowd walking down Georgia Street, and a bunch of people started smashing taillights of cars and that sort of thing. And police decided to do nothing. And this simply emboldened them. And a few hours later, much of downtown Vancouver had been sacked. And the rioting went on until, 4 o'clock in the morning. Claire causes the matriarchy is a danger to itself, collapsing into its own vortex of chaos. Where does the mindless bloodlust come from? From the white non-Antifa cohort, says Chogokin 666. Well, I think part of it is the overproduction of elites, as Tainter writes, that most of these people have gone to college and they've been encouraged to believe that they will join the elite. There are not that many spaces in the elite, and increasingly these spaces are being filled on an oligarchical basis. And, so I owe $60,000 and I'll be lucky to get a job at Starbucks when I'm supposed to be a future leader of the nation. This overproduction of elites is a very dangerous situation, which our own elite hasn't bothered to pay any attention to, because they're not fit for purpose. Walrus Libertarians want bread. Yes, of course they do. Designer bread, I suppose. But no, that wouldn't make any sense, because you ever seen one of these designer loaves? I mean, they're huge. You're not going to have much arm space left for the stuff from Gucci and Saks Fifth Avenue if you're actually stealing a loaf of bread. Save the dinosaurs. Yes, a dinosaur museum was sacked and burned in Kenosha. The joke was that it's not known whether these dinosaurs were in fact racist. You think they didn't loot the pub first? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, they have all those things stuck into the bottles or whatever, right? It'd be easy to go to a department store that sells beer and wine and just grab bottles of that. Talk great way to make your city unbearable to move to, invest in, or visit for 20 years as Walrus Libertarian. You know, the people, I'm going to mention the people who actually come from Kenosha or surrounding area. You know, in the heat of the moment, they don't think of things like that. The people who come from outside, the source people, what do they care? It's not where they live. GoFundMe. What's their excuse for not allowing Kyle's GoFundMe? Because he's a bad person. It's that simple. Visionary Companion said about riots in Seattle in 2001. The police were ordered to stand down and watch while the youths assaulted whites. Note to self: do not attend Mardi Gras celebrations. No, they're disgusting to begin with. And, you know, John Derbyshire has written about this, that there comes a point when you're in a public gathering and you look at the demographics and you decide to get the hell out if you have any brains and value your safety. But he says it seems paradoxical that the left is so patient in seeing to their own goals, content to wait generations when they're very much of this world. Well, the victories have come so fast in recent years. Gender identity, you have so-called conservative leaders now saying, oh yes, I absolutely agree with gender identity. And of course, 95% of the population are saying, what the hell does that even mean? What? This guy, this conservative leader, he's all in favor of gender identity? Emmett Kelly says Nixon's drawdown of Vietnam was also taking the wind out of the sails of the protest movement too. Yes, that is true. Vietnamization was a real thing. And after 1970, the number of KIAs, American KIAs in Vietnam, fell dramatically. You know, by 71, 72, it was something like 500 a year. And also the lottery system, the students didn't really have that much of a worry of being drafted any longer. But he says 100,000 is the size of Pete Buttigieg's hometown. Yeah, I wonder what's happening in South Bend, Indiana. They have a large black population there. 2011 KMG, yes, the hockey riot. I was living in Victoria at the time, and I lived directly across the street from the big municipal stadium where they play soccer and baseball and such like. And up on the jumbo screen there, and it's not really much of a jumbo screen by jumbo screen standards, they were showing the game. And they'd been doing several games, and the idea was you went there and you sat in the stands, the baseball stands, and you looked at a screen. You know, meanwhile paying, I don't know, $8 for a beer or something, when you could be watching it from the comfort of your apartment or your home, where, you know, the beer costs, a quarter of what you're paying, and the washroom is, a convenient 10-second walk away. But no, I noticed right from the very beginning that crowd was eerily quiet. And so I went to ESPN, found out what the score was, and I thought, oh, they're going to call out, all the cops are going to be on the streets after, especially what happened when they lost to the Rangers a decade before. All the cops are going to be on the streets. That didn't happen. That didn't happen. Because our cities are run by stupid people. No resistance will help this unbroken string of leftist victories. I don't share that view. the leftists have created societies that are unsustainable, and we see them breaking down, even as we speak. Tom Anderson says, "I wonder what a van full of people from Oregon is doing in Kenosha this time of year." It is a big tourism spot, isn't it? I'm informed that Kenosha is pretty much essentially Greater Chicago, which is one of the reasons for the problem there. It's neat that everyone has a phone to film these things. Well, things get taken down from Twitter, they get taken down from YouTube, but then they get put up again and again and at other sites. And by the time the media can't outrace the footage, the video footage, as the Z-Man pointed out. Angela Davis. Yes, it's, as Peter Brimelow pointed out, this is the 50th anniversary when she literally got away with murder. She is an unrepentant communist, but I guess she's an American hero, right? From David Eng, Marxist activist Angela Davis is warning that the street demonstrations currently rocking cities around the country are just the early stages of a larger revolution that is needed to bring about lasting radical social and economic change. Sometimes we assume the most important work is the dramatic work, the street demonstrations. I like the term that Marxist cultural critic John Berger used. Demonstrations are rehearsals for revolution, Davis told filmmaker Ava DuVernay in a wide-ranging interview in Vanity Fair. DuVernay's film, the children's classic that she directed, was a stupendous flop, but it has been decided that Ava DuVernay is going to remain on top. It doesn't matter whether she can't make a film that is not about the 1960s civil rights movement that anyone would want to see. No, she is one of our girls, so she is going to be on top. Oh, last time I interviewed this icon. Yes, Angela Davis, communist, revolutionary, unrepentant, and unpunished murderer. Hillary Clinton advises Biden not to concede on election night under any circumstances. Yeah, you see, I guess Hillary's losing it because the projection, the Democrats normally work through projection. They accuse Trump of doing or planning to do what they have done or plan to do. But Clinton, she just couldn't stop herself. She comes right out and says Democrats should drag out the election until there are enough votes for Biden to win. This is the same party that has spent 4 years calling Trump a threat to our democracy. Biden should not concede under any circumstances, Clinton said, because I think this is going to drag out, and eventually I do believe he will win if we don't give an inch and if we are as focused and relentless as the other side is. Eventually they will win. She has pretty much admitted here that enough ballots will be manufactured to push Joe over the top. Clinton suggested the election will be close, accusing Republicans of trying to tamper with the results by messing up absentee balloting to secure a narrow advantage in the Electoral College. We've got to have a massive legal operation, and I know the Biden campaign is working on that. This is from a Legal Insurrection by Mike LaChance. And you can see exactly what the Democrats are hoping will happen. If Trump wins one or two key states by a couple thousand votes, Democrats will simply find a few thousand more mail-in ballots to change the outcome, and they will do this with the nearly full support of the media. If this corrupt process goes on for weeks, we probably expect that the mobs we have in cities will continue destruction to intimidate anyone who objects. It's a recipe for disaster. Think back to the 2000 election and imagine the same scenario, but instead of just Florida, it's happening in 5 or 6 states. The only thing that could negate such a scenario would be an absolute decisive win. On Trump's part, a landslide election like Reagan's win in 1984. Well, you know, the old saw about it's really who votes, but who counts. the votes. I imagine that the level of intimidation against, say, white voters at boxes in November is going to be stupendous. Nancy Pelosi, who is still alive, she says that this is from Fox News. She suggested Thursday former Vice President Joe Biden cancel 3 scheduled debates with Trump because the court-in-chief would belittle and engage in skullduggery. What does that mean? Skullduggery. Is he going to exercise his voodoo powers on the stage? I don't think there should be any debates, Pelosi said out of the blue at a news conference. Exercise in skullduggery. Available. I wouldn't legitimize a conversation with him, nor in terms of the presidency of the United States. Now, I know that the Biden campaign thinks in a different way about this. Yes. Indeed, Biden told us that he's still planning on showing up to the high profile for the president. Quote, as long as the debate commission continues down the narrow as they have, I'm going to debate him. I'm going to be a fact checker on the floor as I'm debating him. Serious question here. You know, NFL quarterbacks have earpieces where they get the call from the offensive coordinator. Is Biden going to be allowed to do that? I mean, we've seen this in the world. Oh yes, all these chess players and tournaments suddenly started showing up with hearing aids because they got terrible hearing problems. Actually, you don't need to hear anything to play chess. Literally, you don't need to hear anything. But it turns out they were getting moves sent to them. But anyone who has been on television several times in a remote capacity, that is to say, you know how it works. You see the bunch of people in the studio, then we're going to talk to, Kevin Grace in Vancouver, and he's in a different studio. Actually, it's a closet, literally a closet, okay? And they got a bunch of books behind you, or, you know, maybe photographs of books. And there's a monitor up there, and so you can see what is going out on the feed, and you've got this earpiece in where you're hearing what's being said, and it's difficult to keep up. It really is difficult to keep up. I mean, you really have no sense of the room if you're not in the room. And there's a well-known scene in James Brooks's film Broadcast News where William Hurt announces himself as a star as he hosts this new special on U.S. military activity against Libya, where he's interviewing someone, and he's got all this, stuff in front of him, papers, and he's got an earpiece, and Albert Brooks is feeding him, or through the producer is feeding him questions and information, and it's seamless, right? It's a hard thing to do, especially since Joe Biden, I believe, is now regularly fact-checking what his name is, what he does for a living, the name of his wife and children. We've seen the constant trouble he's had in wife, female pronouns, hers, she, etc. And we're supposed to believe that even if he has this earpiece, someone is going to say, well, actually, it was not 2,500, it was 1,800. Yeah, and? Yeah, Nancy Pelosi knows the truth, okay? She knows that Joe is, he's not up to it. And there's got to be some sort of trick for him not to terribly embarrass himself. But it just gets more and more fun. Call it Schadenfreude if you like. Donald Trump demands a drug test before first election debate with Joe Biden, claiming Democratic rival was not coherent in party's primary debates until final showdown. This is from the Daily Mail. The first debate between Trump and Biden is scheduled for September 29th. People will have been voting. People are voting now. The people would have been voting, what, 5 weeks before the first debate. This is an absolutely outrageous situation, and it should not be permitted. Nobody thought that he was even going to win, Trump has said, of the final debate of the primary race in March, which was between Biden and Bernie Sanders, because his debate performances were so bad. Frankly, his best performance was against Bernie. We're going to call for a drug test, by the way, because his best performance was against Bernie. It wasn't that he was Winston Churchill, because he wasn't, but it was a normal, boring debate. You know, nothing amazing happened. And we are going to call for a drug test because there's no way you can't do that. While most of the majority of the debate stages were busy with a large field of candidates and in front of a large crowd, the final one on March 15th was just Biden and Sanders, and there was no crowd or excessive press permitted to attend. The first general election debate, Case Western University, Cleveland, Ohio. It appears Trump is aware it's unlikely the drug test will become a reality. I think it's appropriate. I don't know that they'll let me do it, but I think that they should do it. Trump is really a genius with this, because even as the media is mocking him and railing against him and saying this is outrageous, Trump has put a powerful suggestion in the mind of American voters, which is that Joe Biden is so out of it that he needs drugs in order to resemble a human being. And do you want a 79-year-old man addled with drugs, as they used to say, with his finger on the button? I mentioned Bette Midler yesterday or the other day. Again, according to the Mail, Bette Midler now says she was wrong to mock Melania Trump in social media posts she shared while watching the Republican National Convention. On Thursday night, the award-winning performer, 74, sparked a furor by poking fun at the First Lady's accent as she addressed the nation in a televised speech. "Oh God, she can't speak English," Midler quipped on Twitter after initially writing, "Be Best is back, a huge bore. She can speak several words in a few languages. Get that illegal alien off the stage." After widespread backlash, the Beaches actress has now walked back her remarks while stopping short of an apology. "Well, all hell has broken loose because I said Melania still can't speak English last night. I was wrong to make fun of her accent. America is made up of people who speak with all kinds of accents, and they are all welcomed always," Midler wrote on Wednesday. You see, I don't like this kind of thing, the DR3 business. I don't like that at all. I don't like this groveling, constant groveling before immigrants. But the notion that America is a nation of immigrants is a very powerful one, perhaps a majority view. It is not true. America was not a nation of immigrants. It was a nation of colonists. And I'll mention there was no welfare state at the time. It was a root hog or die. And of course, they were overwhelmingly colonists from the British Empire. But when you have Bette Midler mocking an immigrant to the United States for her accent, this does not look good. That is not a good look for the Democrats, because wait a minute, does this mean that all of their, sucking up to the immigrants, that it's all phony, that they hate people with accents too? Let's see, in the ash bin of history file, from Politico, Bush, McCain, and Romney presidential staffers unite behind effort to elect Joe Biden. Several dozen staffers from Mitt Romney's presidential campaign, the George W. Bush administration, and the campaign and Senate staff of former Senator John McCain have signed on to an effort to elect Joe Biden. Yes, once again, the realignment is happening. And it turns out these people don't have to be expelled. They are self-deporting. Oh, the thousands, the tens of thousands, the hundreds of thousands of years of experience that the Republican Party is losing with the defection of these men and women. Well, one of Trump's most devastating lines in his debates with Hillary Clinton in 2016, when she was rabbiting on about her experience, Trump said, "It's bad experience." And the experience of these Republican Party hacks is bad experience and good riddance to bad rubbish. So if we look at the chat here. Okay. KMG confirmed for City Slicker, says Yo Mama. How so? How am I a city slicker? I don't know. I've pretty much always lived in cities. I'm in a city now, but this is the real suburbia, you know. It's like no place I've ever lived before. You know, I was walking the streets. Very few. You don't see people walking the streets here. That's part of what I mean. And I was thinking, what does this place remind me of? And I spent the summer of 1972 in Scarborough, Ontario. And I thought, yes, this is just like Scarborough, Ontario, where all of the streets seem to be somewhere between 4 and 7 lanes. And it was clear that this place was built for automobiles. Apparently, a bunch of Antifa are heading to Kenosha. I would assume that they're down there already. Angela Davis studied under Herbert Marcuse because, of course, she did. Yo, Mama, would California secede if Trump wins? I don't know whether the United States would let any state secede. I don't know. This could be a Czechoslovakia situation where the Czechs got so fed up with the Slovaks. It's like, just go already. Okay, we're better off without you. I mean, suppose it could come to that. If the Democrats try a legal insurrection, red states need to consider secession, says Deus ex suburbia. Brandon Smith, BSA, Balkanized States of America. We should abandon debates and return to duels, says MCT. Or perhaps, in Biden's case, a push-up contest. He's always challenging people to a push-up contest. And it's like, what are you we know you're senile, but did you used to be a wrestling coach? The peaceful secession of American states must happen at some point. I cannot see any kind of reconciliation. There's too much invested here. The elite has too much invested. I mean, look at James Fields. The Z-Man mentioned James Fields. This is this confused young man, very confused young man, half Jewish, who goes out to this, Charlottesville, Unite the Right, and he's associated with a bunch of people who, let's say, are not very friendly towards Jews. And so Charlottesville, of course, they break their agreement with the Unite the Right people, and it becomes an absolute melee with the alt-righters and others being forced to flee for their lives, being chased by Antifa and Black Bloc. And Fields is in his car, and he's clearly panicked. There's people chasing him, screaming at him, pounding on his car, and he ends up clipping a woman, a grossly overweight woman, who dies shortly thereafter. And this woman's life is a total mystery. Apparently, she's some social justice warrior, a paralegal, but apparently she had no social media footprint. Oh, remarkable. So he gets convicted of first-degree murder, and now he's a rape toy in a penitentiary, and there's no possible justification for a charge stronger than, I don't know, assault, but no, first-degree murder, because these guys they play for keeps. They play for keeps. They will not surrender. Oh no, we're obviously unfit to be the elite because everything we touch turns to dust. Do you think think they're going to say that? My trail of disgrace says, were you in Vancouver during the Guns N' Roses riot? No, I was not. Of course, I just read about it, saw the video. These people must have been pleased to have been there, right? Because, people go to concerts and, maybe it was a great concert, maybe not so great or whatever. I remember seeing, some documentary about the Doors and people being interviewed when they were at the infamous Miami concert where Jim Morrison either flashed the audience or did not flash the audience. It seems to be no agreement about that. But there were people complaining that, oh, we went to see a concert and there wasn't very much music, and, you know, the riot broke out. And I'm thinking, you were at the Miami riot. You can, you know, you can dine off this tale for years. It's obviously far more exciting than just going to a concert. William Hicks, debate mod to Trump. Why do you act such a dick, Trump? At least I've got one. Mod to Biden. Why are you always talking? And I'm not going to say any more than that. Okay. It's part of the plan to bring in the third world in order to turn the U.S. into the third world from within. Yeah. The Brazil model is what I keep hearing. KMG for dictator. I don't know. You know, I thought about this, you know, that if things get really squirrely in my own country, which I think that they may well do real soon now, I'm thinking, what possible talents, you know, do I have offer to the world? Political demagogue. I think I could be quite good at that. That suddenly my opinions, which were abhorrent and not to be heard, well, everyone's all turned around on that. It's one of the things that happens in moments of great change. Speak about Kyle Rittenhouse, America's gladiator. For that's what we have here. How shocked are we that 17-year-olds with rifles decided they had to maintain order when no one else would? This is from the Mail. Fox News host Tucker Carlson is accused of justifying murder in commentary on Kenosha gunman charged with killing 2 protesters. Yeah, okay. One of the tricks that the left has succeeded in is conflating killing with murder, because murder is unjustified taking of life. There's no question that Kyle Rittenhouse, 17-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse, shot 3 people, 2 of them to death. There's no question about that. But if he was acting in self-defense, then it is by definition not murder. The teenager was patrolling the streets of Kenosha, some 20 miles from his hometown in Illinois. Ooh, 20 miles. That's, how many days does it take to traverse 20 miles? Claiming he was there to protect businesses. Well, he was doing more than that, because we have video of him cleaning up graffiti, removing graffiti from walls. He tried to surrender to police on Tuesday night, walking towards them with his hands in the air, but nothing was done. It's getting crazier by the hour, Carlson said during a 7-minute sermon on the Kenosha riots on the show. Sermon? Really? I thought the Daily Mail was supposed to be a right-wing newspaper. At least they didn't call it a rant. He was referring to Rittenhouse, a Trump fan. Oh, well, no, he's totally disqualified now. Who was filmed patrolling the streets of Kenosha on Tuesday night with an illegal AR-15. How do we know that it's illegal? Claiming he was a vigilante who was there to protect businesses. He's been charged with first-degree murder. Carlson's remarks immediately sparked outrage on Twitter. Can journalists stop using that phrase? As I've explained previously, if someone says that, oh, well, vanilla ice cream is the best, there will be shouting, deranged, obscene comments from all the fans of chocolate ice cream and strawberry ice cream and all the other kinds of ice cream. There is nothing that is said or done in the world, no matter how trivial, that does not incite Twitter outrage. Critics claimed, don't they teach you at journalism school not to use those weasel words? That he was justifying violence and might incite further mayhem. Yes, and of course those people who are praising the peaceful protesters on America's streets, they're not inciting violence and not justifying violence and inciting further mayhem. Some called for him to be fired, and others demanded a boycott of his advertisers until they dropped him. Well, there's been a shakeup at Fox. And the Murdoch son, who was the lefty, is gone now. So it seems that Tucker Carlson is safe for the time being. Such as Tucker Carlson's reach now, that if he were fired from Fox, you could build a network just around him, the Tucker network, and it would succeed. A Fox News spokesman declined to offer a network comment. Carlson said Kenosha devolved into anarchy because the authorities abandoned the people. Those in charge from the governor on down refused to enforce the law. They stood back and watched Kenosha burn. Now, we're really surprised that looting and arson accelerated to murder. Where's the lie? Where is the lie? Oh, no, it justified anger, whatever. Lots of people are angry. Lots of people are justifiably angry, but they are not allowed to go out into the streets and deface property, burn down property, try to burn alive policemen in a federal building, say. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Perhaps, after they're convicted, there could be mitigating circumstances. But the fact that someone is angry, even justifiably angry, does not allow for insurrection, because that is what we are talking about. Oh, John Favreau, a former Obama puppeteer, tweeted, you have to be fucking kidding me. This is revolting even for this asshole. At this point, it's just, water off a duck's back, because everything that could possibly be said about Tucker Carlson has been said already. Oh, all three of the people shot by Kyle Rittenhouse, 2 killed, one who is pretty much was rendered with just one arm. They're convicted felons. And after Ayanna Pressley, she's the cue ball, who's one of the members of the squad, praised the victims here, that they were acting in defense of Black lives, So, if you're acting in defense of Black lives, that anything you do is justifiable, clearly, right? Yes, Ayanna Pressley said a 17-year-old white supremacist domestic terrorist. That sounds actionable to me. And, we've seen with the Covington Catholic boys that people can't get away with that sort of statement anymore. Now, if Ayanna Pressley wanted to say that in the House of Representatives, she has immunity. But no, she said this on Twitter. He shot and killed 2 people who had assembled to affirm the value, dignity, and worth of Black lives. Fix your damn headlines. I responded, one of the men Kyle Rittenhouse killed was screaming the N-word while demanding gunfire, all in service of affirming the value, dignity, and worth of Black lives, no doubt. Rest in power, convicted pedophile Joseph Rosenbaum. Ayanna Pressley has got your back. There's video of this fellow. He is clearly, out of control. He is the angriest man I've ever seen shortly before this kicks off. It's partially explained, I suppose, by the fact that he was 5'3" tall. This is from RT. One of the men killed in the shooting in Kenosha, Wisconsin, was identified by online journalists as a convicted child molester. A video from the night of the incident shows him provoking someone to shoot him. The 36-year-old Joseph Rosenbaum was reported by local media to have been one of 2 men killed by Kyle Rittenhouse. Rosenbaum was identified as a registered sex offender convicted in Arizona for sexual conduct with a minor, according to Wisconsin's sex offender registry. The man was also filmed provoking people during the night of the incident and using racial slurs. Shoot me, N-word. Rosenbaum can be heard screaming in video footage obtained by Town Hall reporter Julio Rosas. That's not really a good thing, because someone might take you at your word. Oh, let's see, Ryan Krauss. And who is Ryan Krauss? Who is this creep? Oh, he's a prison and police abolitionist. He tweeted, Kenosha terrorist and mass shooter Kyle Rittenhouse was born after the creation of DHS. He is the product of this country's xenophobic and chauvinistic culture that places more value on property than human life. That's not true. Come on. We've already had all these mayors and police chiefs saying, I'm not going to risk anyone just for property. I mean, we're just fed up with the selfishness of property. Property is always demanding these perks, and privileges. And, we're standing up and saying no to property. Bigoted violence begets violent bigots. Yeah. This is not a good look for the left. I believe Steve Saylor was commenting with regard to Portland that there seems to be a lot of people of indeterminate sexuality involved in the continuous protests in Portland. And I'm wondering how many sex offenders are involved as allies of Antifa and Black Bloc, Black Lives Matters. It clearly brings out the deranged, because these are foot soldiers. What are they going to get out of this? Assuming that Black Lives Matter is installed as a dictatorship in the United States, what would someone like Joseph Rosenbaum have gotten out of this? I mean, these people don't seem to, they're simply pawns, that they're expendable. And the New York Times, which continues to, I don't know, strange. They seem to have realized that something is going on here. There's a story by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people today tracking the suspect in the fatal Kenosha shooting, which appears to show a teenager shooting people in protests in Wisconsin. We tracked his movements that night. Who is he? Well, multiple posts on his social media accounts proclaim support for pro-police causes like the Lives Matter fundraiser on his 16th birthday. Posts also suggest a strong affinity for guns, with videos showing Rittenhouse taking backyard target practice, posing with guns and assembling a weapon. As we've seen from the videos, he's very good with guns. He also displayed a remarkable coolness after he had been knocked ground shortly before he was going to be murdered himself. About 2 hours before the first shooting, the producer of a video live stream interviews Rittenhouse at Kenosha vehicle dealership. He is there at the same time as several armed men. Some of them are positioned on the building's roof over the parking lot where vehicles were burned the day before. He identifies himself as Kyle. In another interview, he speaks with Richie McGinnis of the Daily Caller. He says he's there to protect the business, calls it his job, although there's no indication he was asked to guard the site. Later, he claims to another videographer that he was pepper sprayed by someone in a nearby crowd while protecting property. In most of the footage the Times has reviewed from before the shootings, Rittenhouse is around the area. He also offers medical assistance to protesters. About 15 minutes before the first shooting, police officers drive past Rittenhouse and the other armed civilians who claim to be protecting the dealership and offer water out of appreciation. He walks up to the police vehicle carrying his rifle and talks with the officers. He eventually leaves the dealership and is barred by the police from returning. 6 minutes later, footage shows Rittenhouse being chased by an unknown group of people into the parking lot of another dealership several blocks away. While Rittenhouse is being pursued by the group, an unknown gunman fires into the air, although it's unclear why. The weapon's muzzle flash appears in footage filmed at the scene. Rittenhouse turns toward the sound of gunfire as another pursuer lunges toward him from the same direction. Rittenhouse then fires 4 times and appears to shoot the man in the head. He makes a phone call and then flees the scene. Several people chase him, some shouting, "That's the shooter." As Rittenhouse is running, he trips and falls to the ground. He fires 4 shots as 3 people rush toward him. One person appears to be hit in the chest and falls to the ground. Another, who is carrying a handgun, is hit in the arm and runs away. Rittenhouse's gunfire is mixed in with the sound of at least 16 other gunshots that ring out during this time. As it happens, police vehicles just 1 block away remain stationary during the gunfire. Rittenhouse walks with his hands up towards the police vehicles. Bystanders call out to the officers that he had just shot people. The police drive by him without stopping on their way to assist the victims. So I don't know, that's pretty straightforward, pretty balanced from the New York Times. I guess a decision was made that this is not our narrative, you know. It's when you find out that the 3 victims are all convicted felons and one of them is a convicted pedophile, this is not good. But let's talk about sports ball, because apparently sports ball is the most important thing in the world, and what men who make millions of dollars a year for bouncing a ball think about justice, equity, and the like should be our foremost concern, because these are our betters. They're certainly betters in terms of how they are compensated. I'm just wondering, this is not sustainable, right? It's not sustainable. NBA on the brink, the Mail reports. LA Lakers and LA Clippers, led by LeBron James, vote to end season hours after Bucks boycotted game over Wisconsin chaos, as MLB, MLS, and WNBA teams call off games in solidarity. Nobody cares about the WNBA. I don't know, a few thousand lesbians care about it, and the people who actually play the game, nobody else cares. Stop pretending that the WNBA is a thing. Excuse me. LeBron James tweeted, "We demand change, sick of it." Okay. One veteran player warned ESPN that the season might be in jeopardy. Another Wisconsin sports franchise, MLB's Milwaukee Brewers, reportedly boycotted their game on Wednesday, along with Cincinnati Reds players. And there's another reference to the WNBA, a league that no one cares about. So the Milwaukee Bucks forfeited a game, and no, we can't have that. Just because, you know, you forfeited the game, you can't be punished. Let's see. Oh, LeBron James. Yeah. He looks like a monster. I don't have anything against the man, but it was a curious choice to make him the face of the NBA, because he looks like a monster. He looks like the kind of thing that haunts children's nightmares. But he is the king. Jared Kushner accuses NBA players of putting out slogans and accusing them of using the luxury of striking over police violence, while Mike Pence's chief of staff calls them absurd and silly and says, "I don't think we care." How about the NHL? Now, the NHL is very much a white game. Are there any black players? When they had this grubbling for Black Lives Matter, they couldn't find a black player to do it. And there are, of course, very few black people who watch the NHL or buy any of its merch. But Luke Fox at Sportsnet, and this is owned by Rogers, which is one of Canada's semi-monopoly telcos, vertically integrated. You get your cable from them, you get your Toronto Blue Jays from them. They own the Rogers Center. They own everything. Oh, this is just too precious. This is, again, Luke Fox, who is ostensibly an adult. And he writes, "Maybe other parents have discovered the same thing, that it's when you are tucking your children into bed they most want to talk. Ask big questions. Growing up with a sports-mad father, my 9-year-old son, Will, wants to know the other scores before he falls asleep, after I let him stay up and watch the first period. On Wednesday night, that meant telling Will about the bravery of the Milwaukee Bucks, and it meant explaining the PPD next to all the NBA scores and a bunch of the baseball games as well. It also meant a flood of follow-up questions building on a recurring topic in our home that began before George Floyd's murder, but has certainly spiked in frequency and detail since then. The cop was white, right? I don't understand. Why shoot 7 times? How old is Jacob Blake? Does he have kids? Why didn't the NHL players take a stand? Are all NHL players white? How old is this 9-year-old? He's 9-year-old. And he says things like, why didn't the NHL players take a stand? Yeah, maybe he did. Are all NHL players white? Ooh, is that a bad thing? He really has these conversations. Why do I care about what a 9-year-old says? Particularly when it's presented in this way where you're supposed to think, oh, what an excellent fellow this Luke Fox is. I want my son to know that Jacob Blake is 29 years old, that he is a dad, that he was unarmed, that he may never walk again. And you're right, Will. That's not fair. What I wanted to tell my son is that the NHL players we've been entertained by each night this month stood by the NBA, members of the MLB, WNBA, who cares, MLS, and professional tennis, that they all band united with athletes from other backgrounds and other sports for the common cause of decency, that they boycotted or they knelt or they said something into a microphone we could feel, be proud of, the way Doc Rivers did, or Kenny Smith, or Chris Webber, or Sam Mitchell, or Dominic Smith. Wednesday won't be the only opportunity to stand up to police brutality against Black people. There's no deadline for that, but it was a golden one. Hockey is my favorite sport, and today I'm a little embarrassed to write that. I won't pretend to imagine how people of color who love the sport, fans, players, medias, all 17 of them, must be feeling. The 33-second moment of silence to erase racism and wish Blake's family well before one of 3 games played Wednesday night felt flippant. The We Skate for Black Lives signage inside the Scotiabank Arena rings as empty as the rink itself. Wednesday night sure felt like a chance for some action to spread the conversation to a large white audience, to spark some discussion in households and make people pay attention to the injustice. So in the hockey world, it was left to people with no Stanley Cup to play for this year: Evander Kane, Matt Dumba, Akim Aliu, Kelly Hrudey, to speak up. I don't think we should be here. I really think the NHL should postpone the games, Hrudey said in Hockey Night in Canada. I really feel we should be more supportive of Black Lives Matter. The games felt unworthy of commentary outside the disappointment that they happened at all. Did players not protest out of fear of speaking or standing out as individuals while playoff hockey was front of mind for their teams? Peer pressure is powerful, and ridding hockey culture of its rigid conformity and reluctance to embrace diversity won't happen overnight. But this was one on a platter for hockey players, a tap-in. They didn't have to lead, just follow the pack of humanity. Listen, support, be an ally. I'm not going to read any more of this. This is supposedly a grown man, and he's just reveling in being a sniveling sissy. Jesse Campigiato writes at CBC, NBA players aren't waiting for the arc of history. Yeah, because NBA players are constantly thinking about the arc of history. Of course, maybe they know that Dr. King used that phrase. They have no idea what it means. Oh, it always bends towards justice. Does it? Really? After much discussion and soul-searching following yesterday's stunning walkout by the Milwaukee Bucks that led to the postponement of all 3 Wednesday playoff games, NBA players voted today to continue with the postseason. Oh, okay. I wonder how long that's going to remain the case. Oh, this is from ESPN. Okay, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people they needed. We heard it in their voices, the pain, the anger, the desperate cry for justice. Oh, shut up. Okay, the reality of Black pain is breaking America's sports status quo, writes Howard Bryant, ESPN senior writer. For the past 6 years, the NBA has bathed in the congratulatory spirit of compromise, the model for commissioner-player communication, in ousting the racist former LA Clippers owner Donald Sterling, both the players and the league could claim satisfaction. The player's voice was heard so powerfully that for the first time in sports history, it toppled an owner. They threatened to not play in the playoffs if Sterling remained, and the new commissioner, Adam Silver, agreed. The commissioner gained the trust of the players, kept the playoffs intact, and employed skillful diplomacy, allowing him to tell his bosses he allowed the players to approach a line while preventing them from crossing it. And yeah, it turns out that the league had simply been granted a reprieve, and it's the players who run the league. Yeah, we'll see about that. I suppose they can take over the NBA. They have taken over the NBA. That doesn't mean that they're going to bring the fans with them. Yes, of course, I'm sure they're going to bring their black fans with them, but black fans are 13% of the population of the United States. Again, from ESPN, you can't just not do it. Inside Baseball's mixed response to social justice movement and what's next. Talking about the 3 games that were postponed yesterday, and this is completely out of control now. The Toronto Blue Jays, their game was postponed, their game against the Red Sox. It was raining heavily at Fenway Park, so it perhaps would have been postponed anyway. But this fellow Tom Dakers, who runs the bluebirdbanter.com site, there's a lot of good information about the Blue Jays there, and a lot of comments. And I'm pretty much at the turning point with this site. I mean, I can put up with a lot of shitlibbery, but there's a limit, and I think I've reached my limit. Let's see what. Oh yes, Reds and Brewers, Athletics and Rangers, Twins and Tigers, and Dodgers and Giants are all postponed tonight. I'm fine with the players voting not to play. I think our right to watch comes after the players' right not to play. What? Why doesn't this guy just, stop writing about baseball and go out and, advocate for black people? It's the same thing with Stephen Colbert. Oh, yeah, they can't play. Oh, no, they can't. Why is your show still on the air? Why are you doing these comedy bits? How is it possible? How is it just for anyone to laugh in America with this monstrous injustice going on? Stephen Colbert should quit his show, demand it be given to some young, some black person, probably, hopefully a woman, or perhaps a transsexual, or some gender non-binary person, and devote his millions to black advocacy. But, I know the question that everyone is asking in the midst of all this turmoil is, won't somebody please think of poor Megan Mertz? This COVID-19 and now the burning down of America has not come at a good time for this appalling grifter and her dimwit bastard husband. According to the Mail, Megan Mertz and Prince Harry are focusing on production as they try to earn a living in Hollywood because there's no market for after-dinner speaking right now, sources tell Vanity Fair. They're exploring other avenues for work. They've recently moved into a new $14.65 million mansion in Santa Barbara. Yeah, that's really close to the people there in Santa Barbara. Wow, you can't get more street than Santa Barbara, California. Oh yeah, It turns out that okay, so Prince Charles ponies up $15 million for them to live in Santa Barbara, but what do they have to sell that anyone wants? I think that's the question. The book club is going to Theater Thursday, rather, is going to start a little late, not too late. I wanted to talk about Bella Thorne briefly before I move on to my discussion of Ken Russell's Elgar. Bella Thorne, maybe you've not heard of her, so I will explain who she is. She is 22 years old. I'm reading from Wikipedia. She's an American actress, director, singer, and model. She gained prominence for her role as Cece Jones on the Disney Channel series Shake It Up, which ran from 2010 to 2013. She has appeared in numerous feature films, including Alvin and the Chipmunks, The Road Chip, Amityville, The Awakening, and Infamous. And she began her modeling career at 6 weeks old. She has appeared in 30 commercials. She's been on the magazine covers of Shape, 17, Teen Vogue, Latina, and Gay Times, and UK's Company, Canada's Elle, and Mexico's Glamour and GQ. And even while she was underage, it was noted that she seemed very highly sexualized, over-sexualized. In 2019, she had nude photos stolen by hackers who subsequently threatened her with extortion. She instead released the photographs herself. Sure, that's exactly what happened. And she has directed porn because, of course, she would, right? Because she's fighting the power or some such thing. Yes, in August 2019, Pornhub announced that Thorne would make her directorial debut on its network. The film Her and Him was screened at the Oldenburg Film Festival. She won a Vision Award at the second annual Pornhub Awards in Los Angeles for Her and Him. In her acceptance speech, Thorne revealed a partnership with Pornhub to implement a change in the company's flagging algorithm. I have no idea what that might be. But she has joined the OnlyFans crowd, which means that she sends like nude pictures of herself to men, I suppose some women, for money. That it's a private service, and these are pictures I've made just for you. Oh, okay, sure, just for me. You take a whole different set of pictures that you send out. I must confess that the OnlyFans phenomenon is, it's kind of, it makes one lose one's train of thought because, okay, there's like 7 kajillion nude pictures on the internet and, being augmented daily. And I don't know, maybe 2 gajillion videos. So men are willing to pay money for so-called personalized pictures because she is a celebrity. And there are lots of women who are not celebrities who go on to OnlyFans, and apparently they do quite well. I mean, obviously OnlyFans is going to be oversubscribed very quickly if it hasn't been already, and prices will collapse. But this is how desperate these men are for some sort of, connection to a woman, that I'm going to pay, not for sex, but for nude pictures of a woman, and then imagine that I have some sort of relationship with this woman. This is sad, pathetic, and detestable. The LA Times seems to celebrate this. It hasn't even been a week since Bella Thorne joined OnlyFans, and the 22-year-old said she's already made $2 million from her page. The actress became a part of the subscription-only social media platform Wednesday, charging users $20 a month for access to her feed. The site, which allows influencers, adult entertainers, and celebrities to share content that might be too X-rated for Instagram or Twitter, also hosts pages from Cardi B, and some members of Bravo's Real Housewives. But Thorne isn't on OnlyFans just to make bank. Sure, she admits, that's certainly part of it. She's planning on putting the earnings into her production company and toward charity. But she also says she's using the site as research for a new movie she's making with Sean Baker, the director of such critically acclaimed indie films as The Florida Project and Tangerine. It's a feature we are researching as I'm living it currently, Thorne explained via, what else? Text message. What are the ins and outs? What does a platform like this do to its users? What's the connective material between your life and your life inside the world of OnlyFans? How can it change your life for the worst and the better? How far are you willing to go, and how far do you want to go? You can be me or this talented girl from Montana, and OnlyFans could change your life, if you wanted to, of course. This message was clearly crafted by a PR spiv. But okay, so Bella Thorne, up and coming young actress, attached to Disney, now openly embraced pornography, and everyone seems to think that there's nothing untoward about that. One had this has been a media cliche for decades that the line between Hollywood, legit, and porn, not Hollywood, not legit, is going to be erased, and it never happened, but it appears that it is happening now, and Bella Thorne is leading the way. Of course, if I were to wake up tomorrow and find out that Bella Thorne had died of a drug overdose or had been shot to death or had, slashed her wrists or taken an overdose of pills, I would not be surprised in the slightest. She wears a ring in her septum like an oxen, and this is as much of a flashing danger sign as I can imagine. So I'm going to, a little late, 15 minutes late here, I'm going to move into a Theater Thursday, and I'm talking about a film that was made for the BBC in 1962 for their program Monitor. It's a short film. It's 55 minutes long, and it is available for free in 4 parts from YouTube. There's a better way to watch it, which I will talk about shortly. Ken Russell was he was an enfant terrible of British film, and then he didn't get any less terrible as he became an ominous grise, if you like. He is famed for his film Women in Love, The Devils, which I have not seen and which I do not intend to see because I have a zero tolerance for blasphemy. He made a filmic version of Tommy by The Who, and Altered States from a Paddy Chayefsky script. He loved music, and he made a film called Listomania, starring Roger Daltrey as Franz Liszt. Not the man I would have chosen. He made films about Mahler, Bruckner, many classical conductors. His films are noted, or his later films are noted for excess. For sexual excess, for political excess, religious excess, nudity, swastikas, crucifixes. One expects that sort of thing in Russell's films. But before he went on to feature, he worked for the BBC for a number of years. And he made a series of films about composers, some of his famous composers. And you can get these films in a Blu-ray set. Actually, it's Blu-ray and DVD from Amazon Co. UK. It is produced by the British Film Institute, who do outstanding work. And you get his film on Elgar, his film on Debussy, and his film about Delius called Song of Summer, along with many, many, many extras. And wow, you can get it now for £13.70, which I must say is an outstanding bargain. And I suspect this is region B only, but again, if you want to be able to enjoy these films as they should be enjoyed, you really need to get an all regions Blu-ray player. They're not really that expensive. BFI also makes available a Blu-ray set called The Great Passions, which include his films Always on Sunday, Isadora, The Biggest Dancer in the World, and Dante's Inferno. I won't say that Oliver Reed got his start working for Ken Russell, but that's where he made his mark. It is Peter Brett who plays the mature but not the old Elgar in this film. And it is a curious film. It is a documentary with dramatic elements. There is no wild speculation in this film as there is in Russell's later films, well, partly because the BBC would not have allowed it. In fact, it was considered revolutionary at the time, 1962, to have actors portraying real people in a documentary. The film uses recreations or imagined scenes. It uses newsreel footage, and it is really beautifully done. It is the editing and the direction and photography are outstanding, and I must say that it, at least to me, is a tremendously moving work. I suppose it helps if you love Elgar, as I do. Edward Elgar was born in 1857 and he died in 1934, and he was the man who put English music on the map. As I mentioned previously, there had been no English composer of stature since the death of Henry Purcell, circa 1700. So you have this gap of 200 years. Now, of course, the British loved music. Johann Christian Bach made a sensation in London, as did Haydn, and many other such examples. But they just couldn't seem to produce composers, I suppose, other than Sir Arthur Sullivan, who was a great composer, but he wrote operettas. Elgar is, all of his works can be fitted to, about 40 CDs. Most of it is, well, trivial, because he was forced to write salon music in a vain attempt to have any kind of career at all. Elgar is one of the great late bloomers in classical music, I suppose, along with Sibelius and Anton Bruckner. That is to say that he was in his 40s. He had to wait until his 40s to make his mark. The works best associated with Edward Elgar are his Enigma Variations, or Variations on Original Theme, the 5 Pomp and Circumstance Marches. He wrote, I don't know, what is perhaps the best loved cello concerto. He also wrote a violin concerto. He wrote 2 symphonies and was at work on a third when he died, which has subsequently been completed. Of course, these completions are always controversial. He wrote a lot of choral work, and the best known choral work is the Dream of Gerontius, which is based on a poem by Cardinal Newman, now a saint. Elgar was a Roman Catholic, and Roman Catholicism was not well regarded in Victorian England. It was actively discriminated against, in fact. We know this from the life of J.R.R. Tolkien, to give one example. And in this film, we learn, if we didn't know already, that Elgar fell in love with one of his music students. And it was a very curious match, because she was not only 8 years older than him, but she was the daughter of a major general who were not going to have their daughter marry a man who was clearly unsuccessful, impecunious, the son of a tradesman, and a Roman Catholic. But she persisted, and after a courtship of a year, they were married, whereupon her father disinherited her. We have a series of vignettes in this film, and they're very powerful, because they're not, much of the film is not a direct telling of the life of Elgar. It's very impressionistic. that we begin with a picture of a boy on a horse, and it's Elgar. And there are many, many shots in this film which are intended to evoke, and they do quite successfully, his tremendous connection to the part of England where he was raised, the Malvern Hills. And we see him out in the fields. We see him riding. We see the wind moving the grass, moving the grain. We see him riding a donkey. We see him later with his dogs. This was a man with a very powerful connection to the country, really a great sense of being rooted in a place. Now, his career took him to London, which is a place that he didn't like very much, especially since his first foray there after his marriage had been nothing short of a disaster. And he and his wife were forced to sell their house and to flee back into the country. Alice, his wife, was a remarkable woman, not least because if he had not met her, it is quite likely that Elgar would have amassed little. She had a deep belief in his genius, a belief that he would one day be recognized as one of the greatest living composers. And she supported him with her confidence and her love, but relentlessly. There's an exceedingly touching scene that the actors play. They are accompanied by Elgar's music, and a very stirring scene. The young Elgar on a horse is set to his introduction. And so you see on Elgar composing in the dark almost. They were very poor, and the fuel for the lamps was expensive, and to heat their homes was expensive, and more of Elgar than we had. And then we see him handing a page of music that he's finished to her. She into an inkwell, and then drawing the staves that way on the page, and it's tremendously affecting because it tells us just how strong a love Alice had for her husband, and how committed she was to him, and how she was willing to do anything to make him a success. Elgar was essentially an amateur musician until, as I mentioned before, about the age of 40. And it was his dream of Gerontius that led to his breakthrough, but not in England. Elgar he was entirely self-taught as a composer, and as a musician. He played the violin very well. I played a whole host of other instruments, including bassoon, piano. He could play almost anything. He was taught on those as well. He was an amateur musician. The Dream of Gerontius was not a success in Britain, but it was a tremendous success in Germany. It was first taken up by the great conductor Hans Richter. It was taken up to the skies by the great conductor and even greater composer Richard Strauss. And this made Elgar's reputation. That Elgar and his wife traveled extensively through where his works were played to critical and popular acclaim. And there's a charming sequence in Russell's film where we see the actual postcards that his wife sent to their daughter, who stayed in Britain while they were on their travels. She was better at postcard, right? And the postcards were a lot different than today's postcards, far more interesting. And it turns out, you could fit a lot of words onto a postcard if you want. And her postcard, there were a lot of words on her post. It's really quite delightful. And I've never seen this technique before used in that way. instead of your standard, here's what Leipzig looks like, or here's what Hamburg looks like, or whatever. They illustrated through these period postcards. It's very effective indeed. Finally, Elgar made his breakthrough in the country of his birth. The five pomp and circumstance marches were certainly in his lifetime the most popular thing that Elgar had ever written, and Elgar was quite pleased by this. It did not bother him that he had become a popular composer. Later, he was to have misgivings about land and of hope and glory. He did not like the words, well, at least according to the script written by Ken Russell and Hugh Weldon, because he thought that they were too jingoistic. And of course, this is the controversy today, where the BBC has decided that Benson's words to Land of Hope and Glory and the words to Rule Britannia are just too... there's still some controversy about whether in fact Elgar turned against his pomp and circumstance marches. I mean, it's fashionable to say so now. Certainly, there's no question of the fact that Elgar felt a deep regard for Germany and the German people, because without their support, he never would have amounted to anything. And when Land, Hope, and Glory, which is the song in aid of killing Germans, Elgar was profoundly put out by this. And it is true enough that he did not want to perform it. He was forced to do so by King George's command at the great Wembley assembly. He didn't want to do so. I'm just going to read a piece in The Guardian in 2007, which gives an idea of the contemporaries of Elgar. Well, at least I say contemporary. I think Elgar has he's moved on from this reaction against him. But it's called Behind the Pomp and Circumstance by Tristram Hunt. Let's celebrate Elgar's birth in music, but not the sentiments that fired his composition. Oh, first he would have been by the jingoism of the proms, and Guardian Martin Kettle has urged readers to join my Elgar rescue party and reclaim the composer from the grip of the conservatives. It is a doomed enterprise. The truth is that Elgar was a reactionary with deep faith in empire, monarchy, and tradition. More than just a man of his time, he provided the soundtrack for the high imperialism of the Edwardian era. None of this distracts from his music, but there's no point in denying it. In proof to interpret Elgar on soil, riding a white charger up the Malvern Hills, he is lofty, unencumbered dreamer of dreams. This is the real Elgar of the dream of Gerontius and Enigma Variations. Michael Kennedy's 1968 biography bolstered this reading of Elgar as a with the pomp and circumstance music he composed for the money. Certainly, the Three Counties landscape was a powerful in music, but his Worcestershire upbringing, also his political conservatism, the social lower statesman Elgar, like Kipling's The Outsider turned insider, who became the staunch defender of establishment values. He reveled in his numerous arms, which eluded him, opposed Irish Home Rule, and left the Athenaeum Club when Labour Prime Minister Ramsay MacDonald was elected. Above all, Elgar was an imperialist, the moral virtue of white man's burden. He aligned his Christianity with lofty notions of chivalry and duty to craft a vision of empire, which, in the word of historian Geoffrey Richards, was one of justice, peace, freedom, equality, of the Pax Britannica, and of the fulfillment by Britain of its trusteeship mission. All of which his music, his 1898 Caractacus, culminated with a paean of praise to British imperialism, to words written by H.A. Ackworth, and where the flag of Britain its triple cross rears, no shall be for subject, no troet for team. Elgar Elgar was challenged about the jingoistic tone. He was unrepentant. England for the English, all I say, hands off. There's nothing apologetic in British imperial, equally apparent in the 1897 imperial monarchy and rampantly jingoistic, the Crown of India, written to catch in on the popular enthusiasm surrounding the 1911 Delhi Durbar. This rather baneful mask play to packed crowds at the London Coliseum who cheered to lift aloft the flag of England, hers indeed the light. Empire came monarchy, and each emboldened their Queen Victoria took the title Empress of India, and royal pageant assumed an even more Orientalist tone. And then he talked about Land of Hope and Glory. Elgar did have reservations with his ardor for the German musical tradition. He was never an unthinking jingoist. In the wake of the World War, he expressed doubts about the continued suitability of Benson's lyric. Similarly, the somber autumnal feel of his post-war cello concerto hinted at the human cost of imperial ambition. Acerbic Scottish critic Cecil Gray pictured the chorus of Land of Hope and Glory arousing such patriotic enthusiasm in the breast of a rubber planter in the tropics as to lead him to kick his Negro servant slightly harder than he would have done if he had never heard it. It is this anachronistic discomfort at Elgar's imperialism which continues today in attempts to rescue him from the proms crowd. The reality is that Elgar would have enjoyed the Albert Hall sing-along, appealing as it does to precisely his fogyish patriotic sensibility. Real admirers of his music should be able to see beyond the sea of Union flags, to accept Elgar as an imperialist and conservative, but revere him all the same. Well, as if, every composer is not a man of his time. You're going to have to make excuses let's say, last movement of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, with its words by Schiller. I know that still moves people today, but it is obviously very much of his time to a lot of people, including myself. It seems somewhat risible, but there you are. The mystery of Elgar's Enigma Variations continues to excite people, and there's a story from just 2 weeks ago in the Mail about the author Beavis Hillier, who claims that he has solved the mystery of the Enigma Variations. I should explain that Elgar had made it clear that the Enigma Variations were, in fact, a counterpoint to a different work. And this was a real work, or a real thing, and various suggestions have been made over the years, and Elgar rejected all the suggestions that were made to him because this mystery excited people. It's excited people for, 120 years now. A respected art critic, and that's Beavis Hillier, has suggested that the hidden melody in Sir Edward Elgar's beloved Enigma Variations is the Welsh song Men of Harlech. Elgar revealed in 1899 that there was a larger theme to the works, but took the secret to his grave. Hillier claims Elgar embedded Men of Harlech in his celebrated composition because he was obsessed with the military tune and also weaved snippets of it into other works, including Pomp and Circumstance and Chanson de Matin. Now, a lot of people who don't think that they've heard Elgar have, in fact, heard Elgar, and one of the reasons for the Elgar revival, if you will, is club music. In particular, a exceedingly popular club song called Clubbed to Death by Rob Dugan, which was in The Matrix and has appeared in seemingly hundreds of movies and TV commercials. And it quotes the Enigma Variations. And there is also what would appear to be Rob Dugan's attempt to come up with the original melody as well in a piano solo. Elgar, there's a very much a tone of sadness in this Russell film. Now, all documentaries take a point of view. They're all distortions to a certain extent. What you wouldn't learn from this documentary was that Elgar had many, many friends. I mean, this is alluded to when the Enigma Variations are discussed, because the Enigma Variations, each of them is based on a man or woman, or in one case, a dog that Elgar knew. He was a very sociable man. He was exceedingly well liked. He was not a particularly artistic type in that regard, as, say, Beethoven was. But after striving for success for a half century, Elgar found it rather, although he did receive all these awards. Now, he was knighted, but it wasn't any kind of knighthood. 2 knights. He was a baronet, which is a hereditary, say, the knight of the grant of the Royal Victorian Order. Is an exceedingly high recognition, but there was an even higher than that. Elgar was appointed to the Order of Merit, and that is an exceedingly exclusive club. I mean, those are 10 a penny. There are only 24 members of Merit at any time. So in terms of official recognition, Elgar made World War affected him. This was almost commonplace. This feeling, circa 10 in the years just before this World War, that some sort of horrible thing, some sort of disaster was about to happen. I mean, you can see that in the reports of Scots and journey again forward that heroine demonstrably still heroic, still lead the world, etc. Now, unlike Kipling, who lost his son in the First World War, Elgar did not lose his son because he had one child, a daughter, but he was appalled the mindless view on imperialism. Much worse was to come in 1920 when his wife died. And he turned his house into largely a shrine to her by covering everything up. And then eventually he fled back to the country, where we learn that his wife had never allowed dogs in the house, but loved dogs. And after his wife died, one consolation was that he was never to be parted from so much. Final scene of the quite extraordinary have been shown his life, and at the end of it, we see propped in bed as he was dying, such that he could look over the hills to the cathedral. That would be the saw, and the recordings that he had made. A pioneer, H.S. Master's voice, which later became Ian, with, among others, a tiny menuhin. 2 recordings in thought of the things and places and the people in life who had made him happy. Russell is a recapitulation of scenes that we've seen before, but as we know that Elgar is dying, and to the strains of his own music, it is immensely powerful. This is a short but beautiful film, and as I say, I think that any Elgar was available from the Film Institute in a break. And BFI does outstanding work, and almost anything the BFI puts out is worth purchasing, but this in particular. So those are my thoughts on Ken Russell's Elgar. To wrap up the show, I'm going to go back to the chat here. Markle and Harry, they had such a start, didn't they? I mean, everyone seemed to love this story. I didn't love the story, but, I'm like that. But everyone else seemed to just think that this was such a wonderful thing for the royal family. Yeah, all right. That Prince Harry, who could have pretty much any woman in the world that he wanted, decided to marry an American B actress, divorced, and 4 years older than him? That does not look good. The man to the left is a figment of your imagination. Oh dear. Oh, this is one of these private arguments going on. Okay. Fisherman says the surname Rittenhouse was first found in Austria, where the name became noted for its many branches in the region, each house acquiring a status and influence which was envied by the princes of... Oh, well, how about that? Kind of makes you glad that at least Kobe Bryant can't join this psychotic anti-white chorus, doesn't it? Yeah, I suppose so. I guess the NBA won't need a preseason for next season since they're in the postseason from last season and late August. Well, assuming that the NHL, actually finishes its season, August is when the training camp for the NHL is in session, right? So what, they're going to finish the Stanley Cup in September, and then what happens? Then what happens? But no, going back to sports, they couldn't have fouled this up worse than they have. First, this blind panic over COVID-19. Oh, yeah. We have just noticed, apparently, that black men are shot to death or simply shot by police on a regular basis. Of course, this has been going on forever, but we've just noticed now. And we are so put out with this that we're not going to give you basketball anymore, because it would be outrageous of you to demand that we actually fulfill our contracts. We're paid millions of dollars a year by the teams and millions more by our sponsors. But no, it would just, we have too much on our mind right now to play. And baseball is just, they're on the verge of this season falling apart. And this would be worse than a strike, because, a strike is easy to understand. Okay, so Major League Baseball has a hissy fit over COVID-19, and then we're going to have a season, short season, 60-game season, and then they start canceling all these games because people have got COVID-19. Well, they are going to get it. It's not going to make them sick. And now we have postponements because of Black Lives Matter, and they were in a race to get to play all these games, to play more than one game a day for 5 weeks? That was already iffy. And if the Major League Baseball system, if this mini season, if it falls apart, that may just break the sport. I mean, that might be the end of it being a major sport, because the contempt and the incompetence, it's going to be very difficult for them to get over that. William Hicks says Black Pain would be the perfect name for the Washington football team. Today we have the Washington Black Pain versus the Cleveland Browns. Should be an interesting contest. Very colorful. Dan Ellison says, I care about Harry and Meghan about as much as I care about Taylor Swift's feelings. Maybe Megan Mertz could get an OnlyFans account. I'm sure a lot of people would be willing to pay $20 a month for pictures of her. But of course, I just have to assume, these photographs are sent out in a digital form, which means they can be copied infinitely, which also means they're going to be appearing on all sorts of other forums, right? I mean, that's the way it works with everything else. So presumably, one does not need to pay $20 a month to see nude pictures of any celebrities on OnlyFans. Of course, I would pay $20 a month not to see nude pictures of Cardi B. Brent Studemeyer says women have been given too much power and equality, so now we're at a point where guys who aren't hot are very desperate for female validation. That's not how the dating market works. It's the, it's Pareto principle. It's 80-20. 20% of the men are getting 80% of the women. I mean, this has been documented. And 80% of the men are chasing 20% of the women. So I guess you can just give up, trying to get an actual woman that perhaps you could build a life with, and instead be content with naked pictures from a cringe celebrity. It's just, as I say, it's terribly sad and pathetic. Let's see. The dudes at St. Kyle dirt-napped were pretty much hardened criminals. I don't know if the mobs will grow the way 60s college kids did, says Cobra Streisand. William Hicks, never heard of Bella Thorne. Just took a look, not very attractive, maybe a 5 out of 10. She has, the picture, at least that's on Wikipedia, you note this complete lack of affect. And sorry to be crude here, what they call the 1,000-cock stare. She looks like she's lived for 50 years, not 20. A modern major general, yes, Shogakukan 666. I knew someone was going to bring that up. Anran says, favorite use of postcard in a movie is the documentary Man on Wire. Can you imagine what would have happened if the UK stayed out of the Great War, says Yoma? Well, yeah, I can imagine that perhaps we wouldn't have got the Great War because this certainly bolstered France and Russia's desire to go to war with Germany and Austria. And without Britain lending its might, the whole thing might have petered out and Western civilization might have been saved. YT says Amazon released a new health tracking device that analyzes your mood by recording your voice and body fat composition by taking a full body photo. Will definitely be popular with the sheep. Yes, Amazon needs even more information about you, apparently. Okay. Ludwig Snack van Beethoven. All right. Be careful who you call your friends, says MCT. Okay, I'll take that under advisement, or I'll take it to heart, more to the point. Wait till the Chinese take over the NBA, then the players will know what work is, says Justin Proto. Yes, exactly. That's the end of the show. Tomorrow is the book club, and I will be talking about a very disturbing book about Jimmy Savile, Night Bachelor, called In Plain Sight by Dan Davis. And this is one of those stories that, if you put it in a novel, the reviewers would mock you because it is absolutely too preposterous. How did a disc jockey who from the beginning of his career looked absolutely demented and who pretty much admitted the vile things that he did with underage girls on a regular basis, how did he become the most admired man in Britain? How was he given responsibility over several hospitals? How could that have happened? Well, it did. And I'm going to be talking about that tomorrow. I'll be back on the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. If you like the show or any part of it, please, if you would, click on the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not already done so. If you would like to support this live stream, you can donate to me via PayPal at Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. Once again, Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. And contributions greatly appreciated at all times, but especially now as I am going to be in flux for some period If you're Canadian, you can contribute directly to me via interact@kevingrace@shaw.ca. And I will leave you with my traditional benediction in these times of social atomization and civilizational collapse. I do dearly wish that you, my dear listeners and viewers, find a genuine form of human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.